And welcome back to For Such a Time as This. I am your host, Pastor James Pittman. This term, social justice, it's not going away. The evangelical church has to deal with it. Dr. Voddie Baucham has a certain take on using this term, and does it actually muddy the waters?
Number one, clarity. Does using the terminology of social justice give us the greatest clarity? I say absolutely not. Because whenever we want to argue that social justice is a gospel issue, the first thing we have to do is move away from the definition of social justice that everybody already knows. We have to define it in a way that the Oxford Dictionary of the English language doesn't define it. We have to define it in a way that schools of sociology and social justice, yes, Stanford, University of Texas, University of Chicago, a number of schools are offering degrees in sociology and social justice. And the way we define it in order to say this is a gospel issue looks nothing like the way it's being defined in the culture at large. So no, we lose on the clarity issue. The second one is toxicity.
So his take is that when you use the term, you lose the clarity of the gospel, the term social justice. I have another something to add on. Of course, I agree with them, but there's something else to add on. Do you remember when George W. Bush was running for president in 2000? And some on the left was criticizing him because he called himself a conservative. And so they attacked the term conservative, saying that conservatism is too harsh, it's not gentle enough, that conservatism is brutal. So what did George W. Bush do? You remember? He said, no, we're going to practice compassionate conservatism, as though conservatism in and of itself is not inherently compassionate. Matthew 12, starting at 17. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved with whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel or cry aloud, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, smoldering wick he will not quench, until he brings justice to victory, and in his name the Gentiles will hope. That sounds like a good definition of justice to me. As George W. Bush had to qualify his conservatism with the term compassion, do we as Christians need to somehow add or help out God in saying, no, Christians will practice social justice? No, I think the gospel in and of itself is inherently inherently just, and doesn't need help. Doesn't need help. God doesn't need help. The gospel doesn't need help. It is inherently just wherever it is proclaimed, whether in society or not, private or not, politics, church, the fair, the circus, the boat show, the car show. The gospel is inherently just, and wherever you bring it, it is just. Doesn't need help, doesn't need qualifiers. And I think there's good people on both sides, but when Christians use the term, are we inadvertently admitting that the gospel is not inherently just, that somehow we have to help qualify the gospel? No, I think the gospel, wherever it goes, wherever it is proclaimed, I think the gospel is inherently just, and that it doesn't need help with this term social justice.